All right, so hopefully we are live. This is my first ever live stream, guys. So there could be boomer tech issues. I'm just going to check on my own phone if I'm actually live. But if you are here, you are a total legend because not only because it's my first ever stream, but because let's face it, it's Friday night and it's 30 degrees in London at least. And I'm proposing to talk about a Dominic Cummings speech. So if you're here, you're absolute elite human capital. You probably work for SpaceX and you've probably got an H-1B visa. See, on my phone, it's not started, so I don't understand that. So I'm not going to use that. But someone is saying tech seems okay, Stephen C. 1984. So thank you very much. And I was able to successfully read your comments. So we're absolutely smashing it. I could put my mic there if that's better. Let me know. This is a 10-year-old Mac I'm using. So I've reduced the quality to 720 because I just did a test and the video when I played it was a little bit pixelated. So we'll try 720. And Flemwad immediately says, Dix, where's Cox? And that is the question. So today, Paul was meant to do a podcast with me, but he had to pull out for reasons beyond our control. He's fine. Slightly better closer to the mic, says Stephen. So Paul is fine, but he had to pull out. Do you mind having the mic in this shot, though, like a kind of weird, intrusive, slightly intrusive, I don't want to say what it looks like. Martin says, hi, Nick. Hello, Martin. So, yes, as for Paul, I mean, that's going to dog me for the rest of my life, isn't it now? Where's Paul? Everything I do. I mean, I've been doing my channel for years, doing interviews for several years. Used to do a show with Toby. Now it's just going to be, where's Paul? Like, we're not like always together, guys. But it's a good question today because he was supposed to be here, but he couldn't be. But we weren't going to do a live stream. We were going to do our podcast that's for nickdixon.net only for paid subscribers, which people actually love. It's a non-political podcast. And we just talk about our lives and existential problems, but it's much better than it sounds. And that one we were going to do today, and I was just going to release it today, but he couldn't do it. And I thought, what can I do for the great people, either on nickdixon.net or on my YouTube? And I thought, I know, I'll try a live stream. Why not? I've been meaning to talk about this speech for a while. And so it's something I haven't done before. So I thought, let's try this because I felt guilty. And I did the picture myself. I mean, how good is that? I'm so proud of myself for ridiculous things. So, Flemwad, how's your health? A lot better. Thank you very much. So you can tell that's a proper fan who knows my constant health problems. But it was actually completely fine. You ain't podcasting if the mic isn't in shot. Yeah, but I don't know. Should it be in shot? The whole podcast is just going to be this now. Cox had to pull out. Those were the days. Terrence. Very funny. This is already better than I thought. People commenting already. Excellent. Thanks, guys. It would have been a bit weird just with me. I mean, it's just me, Billy No Mates, as we used to say, on me Todd. But at least you guys are commenting, so I'm not totally alone. Martin says, I'm old Labour with a dash of the Ruperts. So many of us are, Martin. So many of us are. I've just said that without really thinking what I mean. But yeah, we're socially conservative and yeah, maybe we feel a bit uncomfortable about the Tories if we're from normal backgrounds. My granddad was a big Labour guy. My dad sort of grew up without much money. So yeah, we were sort of a Labour family. My mum's parents were proper Telegraph reading Tories. So I was could have gone either way. I know what you mean about old Labour with a dash of the Ruperts. Anyway, so in lieu of Cox, let's have a look at this speech. And I watched this when it came out a few weeks ago. And I thought it would just give us something to talk about. It's not like I've memorized it all, so it will be a live reaction. I thought it would just give us something to talk about rather than just me sat here talking about Britpop, although we will do that podcast as well. It's all about Britpop. Let me see if this works and let me know. So let's play.
So first, I'll talk first of all about some of the things that have gone wrong, some of the deeper issues about why I think that they've gone wrong, and a few basics of what we've got to do to get ourselves out of this situation. The old political parties, the old Whitehall institutions, the old media, the old universities, the old courts constitute a political regime. This regime has become cancerous. The cancer has metastasized.
He means metastasized, so I'm already smarter than Dominic Cummings. I won't be pausing this much, but just wanted to get that out there.
And the cancer is attacking everything healthy in the country. All the healthy institutions and healthy impulses are the target of Whitehall. Now, if you imagine our ancestors who built our civilization over generations, looking at a sample of recent news, what would they see? They'd see the regime fighting to maintain secrecy of the vast cover-up of industrialized mass rape of white English children by Pakistani and Somali gangs over decades, while Whitehall continues to import people from the exact same tribal areas responsible. In January, number 10 Downing Street claimed that Elon was spreading conspiracy theories about national cover-ups. This is wrong. I witnessed the attempts at these cover-ups myself when I was working in Whitehall, including the deliberate attempt by government departments to use courts to block reporting of the entire story. Every week,
I mean, that is absolutely shocking. So I'm not sure how much to pause and how much to read comments, guys. So bear with me because it's my first one. But I'm just laughing at the comments. Winsome Hack says, it was very long ago I heard someone unironically calling Tony Benn a right-winger. That's mental. And Happy Slug just has a nice emoji there. And someone else says, I've seen this. It was shocking, but that comment seems to have... Oh, it's back. I've seen this. It's damning. Winsome Hacks. And Stephen said 1984 says, how did Cummings do in his history A level? And that's an insider reference to me getting the third highest grade in the country on my history A level syllabus. Thank you so much, Stephen, for bringing that up. I didn't want to mention it, but Cummings is smart. But look what he's saying here. They deliberately covered it up. We all know that, right? But it's still shocking, not in the sense of surprising, but in the sense of disgusting, because I really think the morality's become completely twisted. People immediately leapt to say, oh, don't call these... What if we get called racist? So that is the morality. Being called racist is the original sin, as we know. But no one thinks about the morality of, maybe we shouldn't cover up rape and torture of children. And I've just realized that it's not great on YouTube saying any of those words. People say grape, don't they, on YouTube? But, oh well. Probably get knocked off YouTube forever. But isn't that incredible? The natural morality now of the regime is just... No qualms about covering something up, only qualms about being called racist. That is their new inverted morality. Let's carry on.
In London and across Britain, people openly march demanding a second Holocaust. And the only people who get arrested are those counter-protesting. These people prevent access to Parliament itself and intimidate the MPs. And the MPs' response is to jabber about how the real danger is white extremism and the real priority is protecting European Convention of Human Rights. The regime's introducing new blasphemy laws, but obviously only for the world's most famous religion of peace. Week after week, the courts use the European Convention of Human Rights to stop deportation of the worst criminals. Recently, a guy who sexually abused his own stepchildren could not be deported because, he said, it would interfere with his human rights to access his family, i.e. the children he'd attacked. And the court said, yep, that's right, checkmate, you get to stay. Every week there's now a mad case like this. The ECHR system...
Just quickly, Daniel, he said he knew, yet now his career is over. He is talking about it. There is something in that, I suppose. But you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt that he tried and he's up against this whole blob system. One man against the whole blob. But I know what you mean. I assume he tried his best. TLDR, the government hates us, says Odie UK. Odie Dodie. Yes, good point. Oh, Haley Longster. Hello, Haley. Long-time fan, I believe. If only this man hadn't threatened us all with prison for not taking the injection. That is a good point. Cummings on the lockdown obviously alienated a lot of people who might watch this kind of channel, and it was bad. My understanding is that he wanted a more efficient lockdown, so he wouldn't have had to do all those pathetic mini lockdowns. It'd have been like one and done. Still, I'm against that in principle, but at least it would have been more efficient. And he said it was just done terribly. So there is that. I've sort of moved on from it, but I know some people never can, and that's actually valid. Ramshackle Otter, what a name. I'm so surprised Cummings hasn't been compromated yet. Yeah, good point. Well, maybe he has, and he just doesn't care. He's a bit of a renegade. Sam says, hello, Nick. Haley says, hi, Nick, you legend. These are my kind of people. Thank you, Haley. Let's carry on before my ego gets out of control.
The system that Britain set up to stop Europe sliding back to totalitarianism is now being used, thanks to cross-party, multi-decade consensus, by sex criminals and by terrorists to force us to prioritize them in ever more grotesque ways.
That's key, isn't it?
You'll have seen recently
the inversion of the reason these things were put in place in the first place. The guy who stabbed the girls in Southport attacked prison guards, but you won't have seen why these cases keep occurring. The reason is the Cabinet Office legal advice states
that it's unlawful under the European Convention of Human Rights to keep even convicted terrorists under surveillance, even in high security jails,
Incredible.
because it breaches their rights to privacy.
I mean, that's unbelievable, isn't it? And it'll be very believable to fans of this kind of channel, but pure anarcho tyranny. I've been known to say anarcho tyranny, coined by Sam Francis, I believe in 1993, in an essay you should check out. But anarcho tyranny, back when Samuel Francis coined it, was fairly minor. Some of the examples he cites in the piece, you sort of seem almost quaint now. But that's pure anarcho tyranny Cummings is talking about. The I'm just checking on the phone how it looks. So okay, should be all right. I look a bit low res, don't I? All right, so anarcho tyranny now is so out of control that, as he's pointed out, this Rudy Cabana, the ultimate evil, couldn't be kept in solitary because of his human merits. So then he throws boiling water on someone. I mean, it's not great Friday night content, guys, but that is the ultimate anarcho tyranny. We're caring about the rights of the worst possible monster, and we all know what should happen to this person. It's called bring back the death penalty. Haley, I mean, he's based. I kind of love him, but also, yeah, exactly. Ramshackle Otter, move headliners to Lotus Eaters. I'll be back on Lotus Eaters a week on Friday 18th. And Carl does want me to go there a lot. And the compromise is I'll go there a bit because I want to do all this stuff. And it's kind of a lot of work doing your own YouTube and Substack and Twitter and everything. Not that I'm complaining, but I am saying to do Lotus Eaters a lot. It's a 4-hour trip for me. So doing that several times a week, quite difficult. But I'm going to go there on Friday 18th and do both shows. And we do love Lotus Eaters. And I've been doing it since the OG days back with Callum. That's legit class idea, R. Otter. Oh, yeah, I see what you... Let me address the question. Yeah, move headliners to Lotus Eaters. Yes, Leo does it, doesn't he? I do it. I don't think any of the others have ever done it from headliners. Dominic Cummings. He's not been on there yet. Dominic Frisby, when he did do it, but he sort of was very briefly on headliners, wasn't he? But yeah, interesting idea. Maybe I'll talk to Carl about it. The Bladeinator, it's live. Sounds like and it's live. Martin Tyler on the football. Nick is the host with the mostess. Martin, thank you very much, Martin. AR Roscat, is he what you would term as one of the good technocrats? Interesting. Yes. Can you have a good technocrat? Who is it that believed in technocracy as a premise? I'm going to try and remember who that was. It was someone surprising that I was watching recently, and that was their whole belief system. I can't remember who that was. It might come back to me. Let's plow on. Sounds wrong. Let's go on with the enjoyment.
So when cases like this happen, officials prioritize covering up the ECHR role. They do not prioritize the rights of prison guards not to have burning oil thrown in their faces. The regime destroyed border control, even though the main reason for Leave winning the referendum was the desire for more border control. Then it imported unprecedented millions, and hundreds of thousands more simply got on the stupid boats in France and came over, safe in the knowledge that the MPs have created a legal regime that makes it practically impossible to deport anybody. The only people left in the world who now listen to what the Home Office says are the tiny fraction of the most skilled people in the world who we actually want to come here. These are the people who the Home Office wages a constant jihad against to stop them coming into the country. So
I love that. A constant jihad against. I mean, DC doesn't mess about, does he? Isn't that so ironic? There are like a few skilled... I know at this point, many people on this channel will be like, let's have zero immigration ever. Let's, I was going to say close the doors, but we have a C already. So like what, a moat? We already have a moat, but can we actually have suddenly felt like I couldn't hear myself. Can we the idea that most of us here probably want to stop immigration, but you might accept, okay, we want a few high skilled people. But what Cummings is saying is they're the only ones that can't get in. And it's kind of like America. If you ever tried to go to America or have a partner try and get into America, it's actually hellishly difficult. And you have to hang around for years, not being able to work. I actually tried to do it. I was engaged to an American. And I was like, well, that's an absolute nightmare. And it's actually very difficult bringing them here as well. You have to have all kinds of huge amount of savings. Now, of course, I would never bring in an immigrant. And I repent. But, and in the end, I didn't. But I repent, so based. But what I'm saying is very hard to get in America legitimately, and actually quite hard in this country when you do it legitimately. But when you do it illegitimately, incredibly easy. So, you can walk across the Mexican border, but just try and go and live in America. And it's like, we're going to need to see your O visa. We need someone of exceptional ability. But you know what I mean? It's like, even going visiting in America, they're like, They just look at you. Well, what's your purpose of visiting the United States? It's like fucking holiday. What do you mean my purpose? We invented your fucking country. Sorry, that was an unexpected rant. But Cummings talking about the irony of any maniac can come over. I think he says that in a minute. But no one who actually is high skilled surgeons, nah, we'll get rid of them. Someone else said this, who was an expert in migration on one of those Telegraph Daily Tea podcasts, which I watch to keep up with stuff. They're not cool like my content, but although I like Camilla. And they said, actually, this woman, I can't remember her name, said it's actually quite hard to stop the kinds of immigration we want to stop. But the kinds that we almost might accept, like your wife is Chinese, Jeremy Hunt was on the show, those ones are actually really easy to stop, but they're kind of the ones you might want to allow. And the ones you actually want to stop are really hard in the current system. Let me just catch up with these chats. It's quite hard to do the chats while it's going. And are you meant to do them at the end? I don't know. Loving it, Nick says Rory Visuals. I believe that is Rory who actually works on me. So thank you, Rory. If it's not, then thank you, someone else. Big Dicks on the live streaming, says God's Own Prototype. Yep, don't know, that might get us a strike. Winsome Hacks, got to give Sargon credit. I remember him from the GG days when he started Lotus Eaters. You mean OG? I was really skeptical about the name, but he made it work. He did. And if you watch some of his old stuff, he was way ahead of the game, wasn't he, Carl? Incredible stuff. I was just looking at some of his old stuff the other day, like 9 years ago, and he's already talking about Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. And he's just way ahead of the game. We're all 10 years behind. What are you going to do? God's Own Prototype says Ramshack Lotta, not a bad idea. They could trail it as a quarterly lads hour. Oh, yeah. Well, let me ask Carl about that then. Some of the people couldn't be on, let's be honest. Me and Leo could be on, Simon could be on, Paul could be on, but you wouldn't want all the people from Headliners. I'll say no more. Great first stream, Nick. Thank you, Rory Visuals. Winsome Hacks, Trump could close the land border with Mexico. We can shut off the channel. They just don't want to. Exactly, and we'll get into that. Martin, so what did Dominic Cummings actually achieve whilst he had a semblance of power? Yeah, someone else has raised that point. TBH, the name is perfect. The Lotus Eaters were a myth. People on an island eating lotus fruit. Yes, indeed. That caused blissful forgetfulness. Hi ho, Kermit. Cox pulled out. Yeah, it's a funny joke. Martin, did COVID shaft the fine intentions? I'll catch up in a minute because there's too blooming many. We'll catch up in a minute. Let's make some progress, as they say in the House of Commons.
Again, we have a regime that waves through maniacs by the thousand, won't deport anybody, won't deport the worst criminals. The only people now that they actually stop and who listen to what the laws say are the very small numbers of the most high-skilled people that we actually want to come here.
There you go.
Last week, people were jailed for less than 3 years for burning a pensioner to death in their home. Ugh. Less time in jail, obviously, than people are now getting for stupid tweets. The regime's broken housing markets, so unless your parents are rich, it's going to be much harder for you to get a home and build a family than it was for your parents.
Yep.
It's executed a set of economic policies that have created the worst period since Napoleon for productivity and real wage growth.
Wow.
It's broken the NHS so badly that Ukrainian refugees returned to a literal war zone to get healthcare.
That's hilarious in a bleak way, isn't it?
These
Ukrainian refugees actually returning to Ukraine during a war zone to get seen before the NHS. That is beyond parody, isn't it? I'm just looking at. I look kind of blurry, and my wall looks crap. We'll work on all that. I'm improving my tech setup soon. No need to keep looking, Nick. That is shocking, isn't it? People returning to Ukraine. We've got a lad from Ukraine in our football team. It's no picnic over there. I'll tell you what. No matter what you think about the war, I know some people think it's not real. It's very real. But imagine going back to Ukraine to actually get seen by a GP. Quickly do these. I could do them at the end. And in fact, Trump has closed off the land border. Yes. I agree with what most of DC says A.R. Roscat, especially regarding the unreadiness of the UK in dealing with the threat of drone warfare. He is tech savvy for sure. My mic's in the way, so I've got to move it. I am elite indeed, says Cave Webster. Of course you are. You're here. And anyone watching later, by the way, you're also elite if I leave this up. You're just not quite as elite as these guys, but you're also very elite. Only the base people for Lotus Eaters headlines. Exactly. Some of them really got to go. I mean, there was one person on the show who's literally the worst person ever, but why mention that, Nick? Let's carry on.
Attack the things that work. So, if this building was suddenly taken over by terrorists, we would depend on special forces to come and solve the situation. Those special forces now have to have meetings about the Cabinet Office's constant lawfare against them. They're having to hire lawyers to defend themselves over operations which they were given medals for over the last few decades. I've sat in the...
Sorry, I keep stopping. Isn't that incredible? People having to hire lawyers, military personnel who were given medals, now they have to defend themselves. It reminds me of, didn't the armed police all hand in their guns a while ago, or certainly threatened to? I think they did, in protest, when someone got shot legitimately, a criminal, and that person was facing all kinds of repercussions. They said, right, we're handing in our guns. It's like, the people we deem it appropriate to use force have to be allowed to use force. It's like kind of like Daniel Penny, although I guess he wasn't law enforcement. He was doing a good thing, and of course he got in trouble. You can't have that. You can't have a society like that. If the armed police officer can't shoot the criminals with the guns they're allowed to have, then you don't have a society. And it's similar to what he's saying there. If the military personnel can't do their job and have to get sued, we don't have a society. Love Sexy, great name. If you write a stupid tweet on a stupid boat, you are stupid. Yeah, it's funny how he calls it a stupid boat. Reminds me of Tice saying net stupid zero, which I don't think is ever going to catch on. Stumbling says flight, glide. Not totally sure what that means. Stephen, can you interview Dom from Lotus Eaters at some point? Dan, sorry, I misread it. Sorry, my old eyes. Dan, yes, I can. Dan Tubb, yeah, I'm meant to at one point actually about the tariffs, but then I just didn't email him. So when I say I meant to, I had a thought about it. Is Flemmod paying you to keep that message up? Oh, is it kept up? Well, tech things may happen that I don't understand. Starred. Oh, no, that's okay. I don't know. Is it still up? And someone else says old school Sam. Oh, replying to Kermit. I can't keep up with the whole chat, but I'll do my best, guys. Let me know if I should pause less or more.
The Cabinet Office watching as terrorists actually on the run from cave to cave in Pakistan call on satellite phones London lawyers using human rights laws to demand that British taxpayers give them millions.
Insane.
And the Cabinet Office says, we've got to pay them out, and it sends over these millions, and then it classifies it all at such a high level that no MPs know about it. These cases are not discussed in Parliament. These cases are not discussed in the media. In 2020, we started monitoring sewage and provided real-time data on disease spread. Crucial piece of infrastructure for public health, same way that the Victorians built institutions which we rely on. So, of course, the regime closed it down. We proved you could do vaccine research 10 times more effectively.
We'll get on to the vaccine. Good point. Why is that comment stuck on the stage? It shouldn't be. There shouldn't be any comments on there because hide current comment. Did that work? Let's see if that worked. Yeah, it looks like that did work. I did say there'd be boomer tech issues, guys, but I think I got rid of it there. There's a thing where you can put the comments on stage if you want. But that's in beta apparently. That's only just testing that. But I believe I got rid of that comment. Good one to have up there. Let's carry on.
So they closed the vaccine task force. We created what I think is the West's first data science and AI team inside a Prime Minister's office. Cabinet Office and Treasury have tried to vandalize it for 5 years and close it down. If you think, well, at least things like nuclear weapons must be taken seriously, no, that's also wrong. For 20 years, there's been a disastrous procurement process costing tens and tens and tens of billions, which again...
Let me address the comment here that's annoyed me. So, not this one, stumbling. And yet I bet 80% of those armed police support anti-ideology that put them in that awful position. Well, do they, or do they just go along with it because they're told to, which I'm not saying is great either. But I think I've got rid of that comment. So now Colin says, don't be harsh about Lewis. Why do people think I'm talking about Lewis? I get on with Lewis. We're friends. Of course, he's annoying, but who isn't? People get it so wrong. You really think I mean Lewis? Come on. There's only one person that I'm talking about. Don't be harsh about Lewis. He was crazy, but his craziness was entertaining, really, hoping Rupert and Ben push the death penalty. As a Christian, it goes against my beliefs, but I'm ready to vote yes. Some of those run together. So, Martin says, I like the Josh interview. That was my Josh Firm interview. That's done well. It's got 119,000. Though jealous of his hair, aren't we all? Flemwood has gone. Good. I've worked it, you see. Pause less. We're just a bunch of retards. Don't worry about our rambling. Am I allowed to read that word out? All right, I'll pause less then, and we'll read them at the end or something.
Is kept super secret so that it's not the subject of discussion in Parliament, not the subject of discussion in the media. Neither the worst pandemic since 1918, nor the biggest land war in Europe since Hitler, have made Westminster change. Quite the opposite. Since the war started in Ukraine, MOD procurement has got worse and worse. When I and others said in 2020 the future of war was drones and robots, Westminster laughed. Now we see all this playing out on YouTube. But the MOD has spent the years of the Ukraine war deliberately resisting facing this reality. And when people return from Ukraine to explain what's happening inside the MOD, they're told, do not tell senior officials, do not tell ministers. Our priority is continuing the budgets for the stupid old tanks and all the things inside MOD procurement that don't work. We want to keep the old gravy train running. So step by step, the old regime has piled up the tinder, and as Mao said, a single spark can start a prairie fire. Britain, practically alone in the world, has avoided serious political violence for centuries, but the crumbling of our regime and its elites mean we're now only random viral posts away from riots, from prairie fires getting out of control. Now, the kind of official story about how government works is that the MPs get up every day and they think about government and they think about the media. Sorry, they think about the voters and they think about elections. This is not true. A lot of the reason why the news now makes no sense is that people think that this official story is true, but it is not. What MPs actually focus on all day is the old media and their promotions. Their reality comes from this old media. But of course, this old media itself is breaking down under the power and the shock of the internet. We therefore see this kind of what I've called a sort of narrative whiplash that now dominates Westminster debates. Everyone herds to one story, the story turns out to be complete nonsense, and then everyone drops it and they herd to a new story, but everything is memory hold from what people said before. I'll just give a few examples. On social media in 2008, the official story blasted everywhere from the New York Times to the British media was, it's all nonsense and it has no effect. In 2012, the official story became, actually, it's wonderful because it's helped President Obama win. In 2016, it became, actually, far from being nonsense, social media technology is actually evil, Jedi, mind-controlling technology, and that's the real reason why Brexit happened and why Trump happened. If you look at the start of the COVID pandemic, public health experts laughed at the supermodel Caprice when she went on TV and said, why are we not closing the borders? Do you remember that? She just voiced what normal people were saying, and of course all the public health experts mocked her all over Twitter, and they said, no, 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 no.
You don't hear about closing Caprice every day, do you, these days?
The actual plan is, we've got no choice but to run up the white flag, vaccines are impossible, tests won't work, everyone will just have to do herd immunity without a vaccine and put up with no health service for months. Then the whole story suddenly flipped. Suddenly, no herd immunity, tests, vaccines, and according to The Guardian and the BBC, the only people resisting this new story were the crazy right-wing Brexit people. The same kind of narrative whiplash has played out in the stupidest war in modern history in Ukraine, a war which never needed to happen. At the beginning, the official story was the Ukraine war has nothing to do with Ukraine joining NATO. Then the official story became Ukraine must join NATO. They started off saying the war must continue because it's bleeding Russia dry. And then the story became the war must continue because Russia is strengthening. They're building this terrible drone force. They're getting more and more efficient.
This is more Leo Kurz type content.
Continue. Over and over again then, we see this constant flipping of the official story, but these deranged narratives are the reality for Whitehall and for our MPs. That's what they're watching all day. That's what actually determines their behavior. Possibly a very telling example, I think, was that just before the last presidential election, if I'd said 10 years ago that before the 2024 election, Democrat presidential candidates will openly state that the First Amendment in America was a historic mistake that will be fixed after the election, everyone would have thought that's completely barking mad, completely inconceivable that that would be the case. In the days before the 2024 election, that's exactly what John Kerry said and what Hillary Clinton said.
Insane.
The legendary music producer Rick Rubin said, "Wrestling is real, the news is fake." And I think this is a very important principle to absorb. Wrestling is real, the news is fake. And if there's one word now to describe the Westminster regime, fake is the word. Fake meetings, fake decisions, fake news, fake all the way through.
I love that. The news is fake. Wrestling is real. The news is fake. Any wrestling fans here? I still love the old Hogan Ultimate Warrior era. I know some people like later eras. I don't want to turn into an academic agent stream, but they had kayfabe, don't they, in wrestling, which Cummings is always on about, where it's the fake story that they sell as real. It's called kayfabe, the soap opera of wrestling. But Ruben's saying that wrestling is actually real. Of course, wrestling is real. They get horribly injured. They all take steroids. They all get their backs ruined. Hulk Hogan's had about 1 million operations. Most of them die early. Mr. Perfect, Big Boss Man. These people all die early, or they have all sorts of problems. So it is real in that sense, and the news is fake. I don't think anyone here is going to disagree with that, by the way. Someone says I should spanner up some mods from the chat. Yes, maybe. I don't really know what I'm doing. Lara, Nick, hi Nick, I'm missing headliners. Sorry about that, Lara. I'm actually free. I'm quite happy to be free, but I appreciate that the audience misses it.
What, sorry? Including what?
He gets heckled. Your speech is fake as well.
Well, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that at the end.
Narrator, they didn't come back to
the only people that are struggling to see this, weirdly though, are the people inside the system.
Sorry, I have to just quickly address any Lewis comments. I'm glad you like Lewis. I thought you were always a bit harsh with him. You try working with Lewis for 3.5 years, please. Taking endless photographs of you seconds before you're trying to go on air. He annoys literally everyone constantly. Of course, we love Lewis, but if you don't think Lewis is incredibly annoying, so I hate the comments about, oh, you say too harsh to Lewis. Try working with him for 3.5 years and then get back to me, please. It'll be a miracle if you don't actually kill him. Anyway, sorry, Lewis comments trigger me.
Why is this? Marshall McLuhan said that a new medium becomes invisible during the period of its innovation to almost everyone. And I think that this is part of what's happening. This weird narrative whiplash and this fake news is not visible to the MPs and the officials who are running around chasing 24 News all day. It's visible to people outside. If you talk to normal voters, that they see these problems. But inside Westminster, the fake story is the real story. And the reason why I think this is happening, I'll put it in a broader context, is I think we're going through a normal cycle of history. Slow rot, elites blind and then fragmenting, sudden crisis, fast collapse, and then regime change, and a new elite with new ideas, allied with a subset of the people who supply energy legitimacy, take over.
Pure elite theory from Dominic Cummings. If you've watched Academic Agent's channel, you'll know all about that. I recommend his book, The Populist Delusion. If you want a kind of primer for it, a kind of summary, go to my podcast with him, which people said was one of the best distillations of the ideas. I'm sure more him than me, but Academic Agent, check that episode out, the first one we did. Hopefully we're going to do a second one on his other book, Prophets of Doom, which is about cyclical history theory. And Dominic Cummings is touching on both there. He's saying in history, normally this is what happens. Things suddenly collapse after the elites get completely out of touch with the people. and so you need a new elite to take over. So elite theory posits that you never have a bottom-up revolution. That's a kind of misunderstanding. What happens is elites become totally out of touch. They become ossified. They fail to circulate in new talent, which is something Cummings talks about a lot, which is not just the politicians, but the stratum below that of business leaders, thought leaders, and so on. The elites say, right, we're not bringing any new talent. We think we know best. Things like the collapse of the grammar schools in this country have led to that as well. You have to be posh and be mates with David Cameron at Eton and all that sort of thing. And then they don't bring in new talent. They become ossified. They become more and more out of touch. And then soon you find they're completely out of touch with the people. And you need the tacit consent of the people for the elite to work. But you can never overthrow the elite. Only another elite displaces that elite. We arguably saw this with Trump in America with the MAGA movement and RFK and Musk and all these people. It was a kind of counter elite. Silicon Valley changed sides. So it became a kind of counter elite. And he's saying that's what we need here, and that's what will happen if you look at history. And I think that's probably about right.
I think the core reason for this is that over a period of a few generations, over and over again, we see a similar story play out. The ideas and institutions of the ruling elites become pulled away from reality. They struggle to adapt to reality. And then eventually, this gap between the stories that they tell themselves and what's actually happening in the real world, this gap pulls apart and they fall down into the crack of it.
Now, yes. So I just want to say, because it's a theme close to my heart, it was the LIBOR party who got rid of the grammar school, says Katie. Absolutely. The left got rid of them. Peter Hitchens has a whole book on this. Very interesting on this. The left, there was a guy who was an actual communist in the Communist Party, something Simon, I can't remember his exact name now. He was a big part of it. And another guy who called himself a Christian socialist. And they were a big part of dismantling the grammar schools. Some people think Thatcher did it, but if you look at it, it's actually the left doing it. I think mainly due to their misguided ideas about egalitarianism, which just means everyone goes to the bottom. And it's something I'm very bitter about because my dad was from a poor background. They wanted him to work in a factory. He used to do his homework with a torch at night, wasn't encouraged to have an education. Dirt poor parents. But he got to go to a grammar school because he was smart and he passed 11 plus. Cut to me later going to a shitty comp with my third in the country at History A-level, if you saw the start of this stream, but no opportunities for old ND, no good universities, and I had to make my own way. And here I am. But anyway, not that I'm bitter, but what happened to education? Sorry, that was a digression.
See this, I'll give an example, a parallel to what I think is happening now, which is in the mid-19th century. If you go back to the 1840s, you see a generation who'd gone through the Napoleonic Wars, writing letters to each other. They can feel the collapse of the old order, and they write about this. They talk about the crazy ideas that are spreading.
So sorry, Roy says I hate grammar schools, but he spells it GRAMMA. Well, of course you do, Roy, with skills like that. I hate grammar schools and private schools. Grammar school just a scramble for people with certain talents. Well, we could get into this. It just means you're a lefty, because if you're on the right, you don't believe in equality. That's the key distinction. You believe that people are unequal, nature is unequal, and you've mugged me off there. Sorry, Roy. But you believe that things are unequal. So, and that's just how it is, and it's not a bad thing. Jonathan Bowden's very good on this, but he's banned, of course, secret evil people. But you don't believe that things are equal, whereas the left believes in the myth of equality, and to achieve that, they'll destroy everything. Whereas if you're on the right, you celebrate that things are unequal. I'm not good at basketball, someone else is good at ballet, and I'm good at whatever I'm good at. And you accept that everyone's different and things are unequal, and you celebrate that. And that's how you get aspiration. That's how you get elite achievement. That's how we made our country great. And then, of course, with philanthropy, that can spread and, all that kind of thing. That's what I would say, obviously, isn't it? Rather than good old communism. Why should a working class guy who can't fit in at grammar school? And then I can't read the rest of that. Yes, well, we don't have time for that whole debate now. But I thought it was the one way that people from a class like my dad's could transcend that. People like Melvin Bragg, Dennis Potter, genuinely transcended their background. What do we have now? Far less social mobility. So there we are. Mark says, love your rant on grammar schools. Thank you, Mark. Shirley Williams was one of the worst offenders, and she was privately educated. Aren't they always? Aren't they always, Mark? Plow on.
in the universities and amongst the young. They discuss the crumbling of the old conservatism, of throne and altar, the spread of atheism, the spread of liberalism and socialism. They discuss new technologies like rail and the telegram. And they discuss how they can feel the 1815 international system, the international security system, is also starting to crumble. Then in 1848, dominoes fall, regimes fall, new countries are created. And then in the 1860s and 1870s, you see a whole bunch of books being published reflecting these huge conflicts in the modern world. You have Fathers and Sons, you have Dostoevsky publishing Crime and Punishment, The Devils, the Brothers Karamazov, you have Nietzsche publishing Beyond Good and Evil. And all of these books are grappling with these incredibly powerful forces at the heart of how the modern world has evolved. Individual rights on the spreading and spreading, markets spreading and spreading, the idea of constitutions spreading and spreading, and undermining traditional ideas, undermining communal values. New types emerge in literature and then become real. They play out in Russian Revolution.
That's interesting. Let's get into that. But I just want to read. I just wanted to read. Rory says, "Remember to like the stream, everyone." Thank you, Rory. And after I dissed you as well. What a guy. Doesn't take it personally. Mark says they scrapped the grammar schools when two successive prime ministers were educated in them, and that privilege should rightly belong to the privately educated. Yes, that's what they went backwards. Love sexy. I know how much you love puns, but is Sultana just trying to stay current? I'll get me coat. So I just wanted to read that. And the other one said he looks like a Make-A-Wish kid. Says Matthew Hoy. Yeah, Cummings not too worried about the old sartorial presentation, is he?
Revolutionaries in the late 19th century, and then you can see them actually seize power in 1917. And if
24
you
case of Diet Coke,
flip to
788 at Asda. Wow.
You have the site of Heidegger, one of the most influential thinkers in the 20th century, particularly on the left, actively welcoming in to Germany's ancient universities the Nazi regime. Now, in the 20th century, you have two sort of big attempts to grapple with these modern forces in ways different than the Anglo-American system: the socialist experiment and the fascist experiment. Both of these failed for different reasons. And then after 1991, this new world emerged. But what's happening to us now, and why the news feels so crazy, is that we are now going through the same remorseless historical process. If you talk to the people in charge, you hear exactly the same sort of things as the old guys were writing about in the 1840s. The rise of new ideas in universities, the young seem to be going crazy. In the 1840s, it was railways and telegrams. Now it's social media, AI, biotech. The international security infrastructure built from 1945 with NATO, the UN, and the EU, all of these institutions also seem to be crumbling in the same way as in the 1840s.
Fascinating. I don't know loads about the 1840s, but it's very interesting. He's talking about you had Nietzsche and Dostoevsky and all these people and all these currents at the same time. And he calls it this remorseless historical process. And it is interesting, things just like becoming outmoded and rapid change that we can't comprehend. And he says that's happening now. Very interesting. And I think it's just funny, someone here saying, did he say this to Boris? Can you imagine trying to say all that to Boris? Like, what are we talking about, old chap? I mean, imagine Cummings trying to lecture Boris on Bismarck or something, and Boris is just out having another kid somewhere. Anyway, let's crack on. I thought it was interesting, the 1840s comparison. And he's often talked about how we had more freedom back in those kind of times in Britain as well, and how you could just build something in Birmingham, whereas now you have to consult some idiot kid in London. And that was interesting as well. It's in another speech somewhere.
So what could we start to build to get ourselves out of the mess that we have got ourselves into?
Great question.
So the first thing is you have to consider the regime as a complex system, and there is no single magic thing that you can do to change it. Asking the old people to change the institutions will fail. Just putting new people in the old institutions will also fail. You have to change the people, the ideas, the institutions, and the tools all together. It's a system that's coming apart in Whitehall, and it needs to be replaced by a different system. So the first thing is that for a very long time, the government has not controlled the government. This is the first thing that needs to change. So if you look back 200 odd years to 1795 under Pitt, you see a regime that took elite talent very seriously, that took individual responsibility for projects very seriously, that understood the connections between how government buys things, the science and technology ecosystem necessary for building long-term capabilities. Pitt had real meetings in number 10 Downing Street, not the fake scripted meetings now where the conclusions are written by officials before the meeting ever happens.
I assume you've all heard about this, and I brought it up on, I think, on my podcast with Douglas Carswell. This Potemkin meetings, as Cummings always calls them. Literally, ministers sit there and the politicians sit there and just read out things they're told to say at meetings. They all read to each other. How mental is that? Apparently, that's literally what happens, while the SPADs are the ones actually controlling everything. And now, by the way, Dominic Cummings is talking about William Pitt, and he's saying how back then in the late 18th century, things were actually real rather than Potemkin, as the word he always says. Didn't say it then, but he probably will.
That's not a parody from Westminster. That is actually the process for how modern government works. The big battle in Whitehall over power is not what people say in meetings, which are largely fake and irrelevant. The battle for power in Whitehall is about who gets to write the conclusions of what the Prime Minister says before the meeting ever starts.
Madness.
That's not how Pitt did things, but it's how Whitehall works now. Back then, technologists and entrepreneurs could build great things fast and at scale because of wise procurement, which was taken extremely seriously. Parliament threw people in jail during the Napoleonic Wars for procurement scandals, in stark contrast to how, after COVID, those responsible for procurement scandals were all obviously promoted and put in the House of Lords, given various honours and big consultancy contracts. So the Whitehall of 1795 was more like SpaceX 2025 than Whitehall 2025 is.
Isn't that amazing? The Whitehall of 1795 was more like SpaceX than the Whitehall of 2025. I love that. And he's done the reading. I'm going to take Dominic Cummings' word for that. Obviously, I don't know. And all this, we're sort of taking his word for it, aren't we? Because we're not in there. We don't know exactly how these things work. But he seems to be pretty honest about this stuff, and he seems to have nothing to lose. So, I tend to agree with him. That's what's fascinating to me, that people assume everything is progress all the time. And that brings us back to that book, Prophets of Doom, that Nima wrote. The idea of linear history, we're always progressing. There's a counter-narrative from people like Spengler and Vico and all these kind of thinkers who say, no, history is cyclical, it's rise and fall. And what Cummings is saying here is, actually, we had it sorted in 1795, a more efficient system where things actually got done and elite talent was actually allowed to operate. So that is pretty interesting. Don't know if I'm allowed to say that word, Lorne, but thank you.
All of these different aspects, therefore, have to be systematically reversed if you're going to actually have a serious government and a different political regime. On day one, a new prime minister that actually wants to take the country in a different direction and solve these problems has to immediately fire and replace many, many, many of the existing officials who control things. The Prime Minister's office needs to take back control of number 10.
Take back control.
It needs to close the Cabinet Office, and it needs to take over the functions that the Cabinet Office has acquired over a century. Now, remember, the Cabinet Office was set up in 1916, 1917 in the crisis of World War I, as the old Victorian system couldn't cope They created the Cabinet Office in this crisis to do with the Somme and the disaster playing out in Flanders. This system has gradually taken more and more and more and more power, so that the real people with power inside the system have become Cabinet Office officials. The Cabinet Secretary now has something like 100 times more power than the average minister does. People often ask me about 2019 and the Brexit negotiations. What did this minister think about this? What about the rows between this minister and that minister? And my answer to them is, I don't really remember, and it wasn't important. The ministers were not important in this process. I cared very much what 30-year-old officials in the Cabinet Office thought about these things, because they were the ones with real power. If all kinds of things happen today, when bombs go off, for example, or if a Secretary of State is caught by the security services in unsuitable liaisons, it's not the ministers that get called first. The wiring diagram of power inside the system means that it's the Cabinet Secretary who's called first when the bombs go off and when crises happen. And the Cabinet Secretary decides which ministers are allowed to see what.
Unsuitable liaisons
All
coming
of
to a
that
cinema
must
near
change. We can't carry on. If you want things to be different, you can't carry on with a system where the political ministers are essentially non-player characters in a video game, and the characters with real power are the unelected officials. You can't carry on with a system where the ministers all walk up Downing Street and smile for the cameras, and the media and the MPs pretend that the decisions are actually being made in the Cabinet. I can tell you the decisions are not made in the Cabinet. In the whole of 2020, I never even bothered attending Cabinet once. The reason is because it's become fake meetings. Whereas the real decisions and the real power has moved elsewhere.
You can see why MPs don't love Cummings. He just called them all NPCs and said they have absolutely no power. For more on this, read All Out War, Tim Shipman's book, or watch that quite interesting, if biased, Brexit and Uncivil War Channel 4 film with Benedict Cumberbatch. It's actually very good as long as you accept the writer has a Remainer bias.
So, you replace people, you bring in new people. You close down the Cabinet Office, the Prime Minister takes over the Cabinet Office, the powers of the Cabinet Office. At the moment, the Prime Minister has literally no role whatsoever in the management of the key permanent secretaries who actually run the government departments.
Mental.
Nothing at all to do with it. The entire HR system of Whitehall works for the Cabinet Secretary, not for the Prime Minister. If you want change on what's important, if you want to see a different regime, you have to have a Prime Minister who is actually in charge of setting the priorities for the key officials in the country. That doesn't happen now. When we started to do that in 2020, the system went crazy and complained that it was fascism. But this really should not be controversial. In the old days, ministerial responsibility was genuine. It became fake. Switching it back to being genuine is not fascism. I think the essential concept of permanent civil servants, which was started in the...
Sorry, I just wanted to react to Neil saying, if you think Farage is going to do all this, you're deluded. And that's the key, isn't it? This is so hard and so complicated to do. Who the heck is going to be able to do it? And that's partly why I wrote my controversial why I might vote Tory piece. One commenter said it was a cry for attention. I don't do things as cries for attention. I don't even like attention, weirdly, given the job I'm in. But I actually wrote it because someone texted me that day something Farage had said in the New Statesman that he was moving to the left of Jenrick on immigration. And then it just sort of flowed out of me. I was like, what is going on? And I've known before that Jenrick was outflanking Farage from the right. But just on that point, the idea that Reform are going to get in with no experience of government and dismantle all this does seem far-fetched. Then again, as Lee Harris was arguing with me in a forthcoming podcast, the idea that the Tories, who are so wedded to the blob, are going to do it themselves, also far-fetched. So, I don't know what we do about that.
1850s is at the root of a lot of the problems. The civil service system has become a closed caste system with Brahmins and untouchables. The Brahmins are insiders promoted through the system regardless of failure. Look at our current cabinet secretary. He was responsible for not just parts of the blood scandal, but also for pandemic preparation and planning. In spring 2020, he tried to get the Prime Minister to go on TV and say that the answer to the COVID pandemic was that everyone should try and get COVID as soon as possible, like the chickenpox parties of the old days. Of course, therefore, the old system has not fired him, it's promoted him, it's given him honours, and it's now put him in charge of the entire civil service. The untouchables are the roughly 100% of the world's most effective people, none of whom can be hired inside Whitehall by ministers. And the insane HR system means that everybody changes jobs every 2 years, roughly. So if you're sitting in number 10, you have a series of meetings with someone in charge of, for example, say, Chinese cyber operations. And you talk to them, and you talk to them, and you have a meeting after meeting, and then suddenly this person vanishes completely, and some new person arrives in number 10. And you say, oh, hello, who are you? And they say, oh, I've replaced so-and-so. And you say, oh, right, oh, okay. So what have you been doing? Oh, I've been in charge of special educational needs for the last 2 years. Oh, right, okay. And you're now in charge of Chinese cyber operations. Yeah. So the justification for the entire permanent civil service system is supposedly that it develops expertise. But the actual way in which it works now is pathologically hostile to actual expertise. It doesn't let anyone develop expertise, and it forces people, if you want promotion and you want to get a pay rise, you have to do this constant zigzagging every 2 years up through the HR system. All of that needs to be completely swept away.
Afuera.
It was created in the 1850s, and in my opinion, it's no coincidence that from the time that the so-called professional civil service took over, that marked the beginning of institutional dysfunction spreading throughout the Westminster system, because it became fundamentally impossible for elected ministers to change things by changing the people. And that's really when this culture of fake responsibility and fake meetings started to take over.
Right. Got to be able to sack people, but it's very, very hard in this system.
So there's a few other things that you need to do in parallel with this, once you've actually taken power and the Prime Minister is now actually in charge of Whitehall.
Let's just do that in a sec, because I want to say thank you to AI Empire, who's done a super chat and paid some money, as did Rory, by the way. Thank you, Rory. And thank you, AI Empire. And AI Empire says, Reform just need to do a great repeal bill and revoke all laws post-Blair, then go from there. Yes, many people have said that. It's not quite that simple, is it? Pete North will tell you in fairly strong terms on Twitter why it's not that simple. But yes, that would be very nice, wouldn't it? And some people saying that the chickenpox parties were a good idea. Yeah, I mean, it could have worked. Would have been probably better than what we had. Hi-ho, Kermit. Never noticed how close your name is to 37th US President Dick Nixon. Well, Kermit, I had a joke about that I opened with for many years, because if it works, why not, on the comedy circuit. So you can check that out probably in one of my, maybe that video I did with Comedy Unleashed. I think it's called If Hitler Started a Comedy Night, which has got a few 100,000 views on YouTube. But yes, I did notice that. Great man, by the way, Richard Nixon. Misunderstood. Bit like Nick Dixon. Discuss.
The power of the Treasury has to be shattered into 1,000 pieces. The Treasury cannot do cost control. Witness the shambles that it made over contracts in COVID, where it essentially washed its hands of it and raised the white flag. The Treasury's processes for all long-term budgets are an absolute disaster. They make it impossible for people to plan. They make everything super expensive. Today, with the publication of the spending review, you see this process. Now, behind the scenes, what happens is everybody lies in the spending review process, and all of the budget numbers everyone knows are completely fake. And the budget numbers that will all be published today, everyone at the heart of power inside the Treasury and the number 10 system knows those numbers are all fake. The long-term budgeting process also means that you have a constant churn whereby entities all over Whitehall can't actually organize themselves over a 5 or 10 or 15-year period. They're constantly told by the Treasury, no, your ceiling for budgets is just here, even though the project extends for the years beyond that.
Just want to say, yes, I'm sorry, I just changed screen for a second. I am back. It is incredibly hot here. It was 30 degrees before, and so now it's a mere 29. And I just want to welcome Simon. 1,000 pieces echoing JFK on the CIA there. Very interesting. I thought of A Million Little Pieces, the James Frey book, but different frames of reference, Simon. Thank you for coming, Simon. And we did talk about elite theory earlier, you'll be pleased to know, because Simon does streams with Academic Agent, so he's big on that stuff. Bit warm, Nick. It's 29 degrees. It's insane. It was 30 when we started. So if I do use this like this, there's no shame in that. It's like falling down. It's the start of falling down. I'm about to just go on a killing spree. Don't you identify more and more with Michael Douglas from Falling Down the older you get? Discuss.
You see completely crazy things like the officials in charge of Project X, say in the MOD, say, right, everyone on Project X is fired in June, because the Treasury won't guarantee that the budget is still going to be there after, say, November. The people are fired, things close down, blah, 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 blah. And then in November, the Treasury goes, oh, actually, some 30-year-old who did red PPE 100 yards from here says, no, actually, this program can carry on. And then the people are all hired again. All you've done is waste millions of quid and waste everyone's time. And this is regarded as a completely standard, sensible way for Whitehall to organise how it spends all of your money.
All of your money. Just sorry to keep pausing. I still don't know how much to pause. Good evening, Simon. He says, good evening, Nick. Nice to see a commentary live stream. Indeed, we're trying things, Simon. Even at my age, you can still try new things. It's never too late. And I just want to address Bruce Wayne's comment. Have you finished the biography about Enoch Powell yet? I haven't. I think I'm 200 pages in. Everyone reads Simon Heffer's Enoch Powell biography. If you can get it. I tried to get it, couldn't. Then I ordered it again, it came. It's so good. And I'm planning to do a video on that. Let me know what kind of video you'd want on that, because I'm thinking about spending a huge amount of time and doing a whole Enoch Powell video where I go through his life, like the top 10 things you didn't know about him, but not as sloppy as that. And actually do a serious video about it. But it's going to take a lot of work, so let me know if you want that. It'd be also good to speak to Simon Heffer about it, but I'll look into that as well. I'm not very good at getting people's contacts and stuff, and I don't have my guest booker anymore. But let me know if you want an Enoch Powell video. Sorry to keep pausing.
The Prime Minister's office has got to take responsibility for building a completely new process for long-term budgets, and that obviously intersects with government procurement. As I said before,
read along of 1,000-page Enoch Powell book.
This country was the best country in the world at actually doing procurement, and now it is a poster child for some of the most insane decisions that you can possibly imagine. Even the simplest things like doing a dual carriageway, adding a lane in a dual carriageway over 18 miles is now scheduled to take 25 to 30 years.
What?
That is completely normal. And if you sketched out the process, what you would see is start here, planning process 1, court process, judicial review, appeal, environmental process 1, court process, judicial review, appeal, planning process 2, judicial review 2, environmental process 2, that gets you up to maybe 15 years or so.
Insane.
This process continues sequentially, and then the building the road is like that little bit there at the end. That actually happens in like the last few years. That itself is obviously too long. That doesn't need to take 5 years. But there's the 25 years beforehand. Now, this is not a hypothetical example. These are examples that I used when Prime Minister's Questions happens on a Wednesday at 12 o'clock. I used to use that time in the Cabinet Room in number 10 Downing Street to bring officials in from all over Whitehall to go through these kind of budgets and to go through these projects to try to figure out why on earth the MAD system works as it is.
Now, we'll get onto that in a second. I just want to say that bit when he says how long it takes. 18 miles of dual carriageway takes 25 to 30 years. Then he does that whole bit. That's like his big stand-up bit. That's like the out bit from Mickey Flanagan or the man draw from Michael McIntyre. That's like a set piece bit that was so good. But it's, I say good meaning horrific. I just want to say thank you, Martin, for the super chat. Every day I feel like I'm falling down. Yes, indeed. All the best from Haifa. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you very much, Martin. It's good to know we've got an international audience. Let's make some progress.
And this is an actual timetable for the A66 road that runs across the north of the country. One carriageway for 18 miles in 2020. When I said to them, this is completely insane, go away, come back next week with a better plan, they said, well, Dominic, we've squeezed everything we possibly can. We've done everything that's humanly possible. We think we can get this down to about 23 or 24 years.
Insanity.
That was regarded as a perfectly reasonable way for things to proceed. And if you say this is mad, and what we're going to do instead is just systematically rip up all of these rules, repeal the primary legislation, change the judicial review process, etc., then again, much of the system will go completely crazy.
Completely
because the system
crazy.
doesn't see itself as there to deliver
completely
for you,
crackers.
the voters, for the taxpayers. The system sees itself as there to protect itself. It's very routine when you're sitting inside number 10 and you look at rolling news and you see some story scrolling across the bottom of the screen saying, disaster on blah, 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 6 o'clock BBC News, and you look out the window and you see the official responsible for it at 3:30, just pottering through horse guards on the way to the tube, walking home. It's a completely normal thing because no one cares about actually delivering the thing in a sensible way. And the culture of direct responsibility is now almost completely unknown and is seen in Whitehall as something that's almost deranged if you try and do it. So during COVID, when we said, okay, we've got to try and get testing going faster, we've got to try and get vaccines going faster, we've got to try and get 1,000 things going faster, we're going to put a named individual in charge of each of these things so that everybody knows that person is the person to call and that person who is responsible, right? This is not exactly revolutionary management. This is how every single functioning entity on planet Earth works. But this was seen in Whitehall as revolutionary and hostile and to be resisted.
Bonkers, isn't it? When you find out how it works, and you find out also from Cummings that like they're on old like Windows 95 PCs and nothing works, and there's no communication between number 10 and number 11, and a discussion about whether they should use Google Teams or another program takes 2 years and hundreds of thousands of pounds, and you're just like let's give up. It's horrendous when you listen to it. And I just wanted to say to Simon, yes, I have watched that Enoch Powell film when he's old. I've watched everything on Powell. He comes across incredibly well, sharp as a tack near the end of his life. I felt slightly ashamed that I'd ever listened to the smears. Indeed, Simon, he is the most smeared man, no pun intended, in politics. And that's what I'll address in my video as well as many other things, because the real Powell is completely different to how people say. Anyway, let's crack on, because I think this is going to last 4 hours if I don't plow on.
Now, if you think that that's the mindset, even when thousands of people are dying every week, and it's a genuine crisis, imagine what it's like trying to change things when in normal times now. That's why Starmer is finding that he has meetings, everyone nods and smiles, yeah, Prime Minister, yeah. And then he goes, and then 2 weeks later, 3 months later, 6 months later, yeah, no one's done anything. Because no one really cares what the Prime Minister thinks. The system just rumbles on with its own priorities. Why has Starmer got himself into the single biggest political disaster of his premiership on winter fuel payments? Was that in his manifesto? No. Did he say he wanted to do it? No. Did Labour MPs want to do it? No.
There's now
Why
been
did it happen?
another disaster
because
on
it's
benefits.
on the Treasury officials, 30-year-old Treasury officials priority list. And if you've got non-player characters as prime ministers and as ministers, and a system that operates in this mad way, then the system will put its priorities in front of the ministers and push them out on TV to announce things. And then the rest of the MPs go, where the hell is this coming from? Why are we doing this? We don't understand. So all of these different things need to change. The other thing that you need to do in number 10, so actually taken power from the Cabinet Office, you've closed the Cabinet Office. You've got rid of the HR system so that you can fire people, replace people,
Roy tells me the volume's too low on the speech. Is it? Let me put it up.
hire the world's best people
Much
to
too
come and
late.
work on important government problems. You've changed the procurement system so the government can now actually buy and sell and do things on normal timescales rather than on 20, 30-year timescales. The other central thing that has to happen is that science and technology have to become embedded in the Prime Minister's office as a core priority of number 10 Downing Street. I'll give just a couple of examples of this. If you talk now to the high-status pundits in Westminster, they are full of laughter and hilarity about the developments that are happening in Silicon Valley in the AI labs. Ha ha ha, they say, these autocomplete chatbots, how silly that people are taking them seriously. It's a scam, it's a bubble, it's nonsense. That is the sophisticated take from Westminster's finest political analysts. This is obviously, as many people in this room will know who actually use these tools, completely crazy.
Completely crazy.
Now,
Completely
unlike
crackers, like the Prime Minister's
Westminster,
girlfriend.
I've followed this for 20 years, and I often talk to the people who are building in these frontier AI labs what they're actually doing and what they think is going to happen. And I've said repeatedly that Westminster is going to be shocked by what happens every year. That's vindicated, and it's going to be vindicated more and more and more over the next 3 or 4 years. 5 years ago, people were laughing at GPT because it couldn't do 3 plus 2. Last year, DeepMind showed that they could get a silver medal in the IMO, the Maths Olympiad, and I'm told that various people have already privately, but not published yet, gold medal performances from these models on the IMO.
Quite scary. And now we have
what
Mecha
you're going to see
Hitler
over the next
Grok.
few years is in area after area after area, these models are going to do better, as well as or better than human performance. In parallel with this, you have a lot of dynamics in biology which are democratizing tools and democratizing knowledge and making it easier and easier to do biological engineering. If you're interested in this subject, I suggest you read stuff by a guy called Kevin Esvelt, who developed the gene drive. He's written a lot of things about what the trends of this are. Now, these two things are obviously also going to intersect. The models are going to make it easier to do amazing things as biological engineering democratizes, but also extremely terrible things as well are going to be on the cards. Both of these things is going to become simpler and cheaper. We can't carry on, COVID should have taught us, but hasn't taught Westminster. We can't carry on with a government system in which we have a Western civilization that's based on science and technology and a political, cultural elite dominant in politics and Whitehall that is ignorant of or contemptuous about science and technology. That is a recipe for catastrophe. So the other thing which a new regime that's actually serious about turning the country around has to do, as well as these kind of bureaucratic and power changes that I've described inside the number 10, 70 Whitehall complex, it has to also say that science and technology, both for prosperity and for security, are now going to become critical aspects of how the Prime Minister spends his time, in the same way that they are on national security issues and budgets. They have to be at the top of his inbox and completely integrated into how the Prime Minister's office actually works. If you do all these things, then you won't solve all of our problems for sure, but you will at least have a functioning regime that can build things rather than a dysfunctional and pathological regime. Let me just check what time it is. Okay, I should shut up. I guess the last thing I'll say then is, if I was going to be on a desert island, one of the top 3 books that I would take with me is War and Peace. And if you think about War and Peace, there are 2 kind of core strands running through. One strand is that these inexorable forces of history collide and smash, and it doesn't really matter what individual people do and think, they just get broken and washed along in the flood. And the other part of the story is that at sometimes what one person thinks and does can have a huge effect on what happens. Both things are true at the same time. Over the next 5 years, everyone in this room is going to live through 2 things. They're going to live through these old regimes of the Western world continuing to crumble and disintegrate and fail. Both the old parties are already dead. It's like one of those Japanese movies where samurai is like their heads off, but they haven't quite realized yet that they're dead. But they are. The samurai has done his bit, and Tories and Labour are now done. That process is going to continue, and the AI and biological engineering strand is going to continue as well, and these 2 things are going to be very connected. These forces are going to smash into all of our lives. They're going to affect them in all sorts of ways. But also, I would just say, as a last thing, that as per Tolstoy's message in War and Peace, also we can have agency at these moments of crisis. Everyone here can build things. You can prepare for this extremely different world that's coming. One of the most obvious things to do, I think, is not everything can be about Westminster. Not everything should be about Westminster. It's one of the problems that it's centralized so much power there. We've got to deal with the dysfunction of Westminster. But we have to return to a civilization in this country where other parts of the country can actually build things and do things. And the most obvious thing, it strikes me, that something that everyone in this room could get involved with, is the replacement of the old school system. The AI thing means it's doomed, a bit like the old parties. The current system where we put these kids in and they have fake exams, fake curriculum, created by the bureaucratic state to try to justify that it knows what it's doing, which has destroyed in lots of ways the old European great education and the institutions. That old system is doomed. New things are definitely going to come, and the sooner that people like those in this room start building them, what comes next, the better. And that's something where we can do things ourselves. We don't have to wait for Westminster. We shouldn't wait for Westminster and Whitehall. They won't like it, but they're too broken to be able to stop us. So we can start building alternative things for our children to go into. And if you start creating an alternative educational ecosystem in time, that will help us replace the rotten old political regime which is crumbling at the same time. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
All right. You've got quite inspirational at the end, didn't he, there? He was almost doing his Brexit. What did we say we're going to do? Take back control. What are we doing? Take back control. What have we done? Take back control. Pfft. And he smashes. Have you seen that? And he smashes the thing in the ceiling. You've got to be a proper nerd to know that. So some people disagreeing about technocracy here, saying, that's the problem that Haley was saying. Disagree. If you do all these things, you end up with millions of people poisoned by dodgy injections because the science said so. And that is a point of disagreement with Cummings and the technocrat types. I've remembered what I was thinking of before. It was in the Elon Musk biography I'm reading, which I'm also reading at the same time as Enoch Powell to confuse myself. And I think it was Douglas Adams where he got the idea, but it was saying that he believed in technocracy. Someone can correct me, but I think it was that Douglas Adams believed in technocracy, or I might be misremembering that, but if I can't go and get the book now, it's in the other room. But anyway, that's what I was thinking of. So some people disagree on technocracy. And Steve P says, when was this live, Nick? It was a few weeks ago. Does anyone want to do the Q&A after? He goes into a Q&A with Stephen Edgerton, who has been on my podcast. Or do we want to stop because we've done the main speech? I don't know. I don't mind. I'm just here. let me know if you want to carry on or not. Maybe I'll read some comments while we carry on. But now our man Steve, that's a bit louder. Our man Steve asked him the cutting questions as he is wont to do.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for that excellent and insightful speech. I want to start by talking about the Boris wave.
Oh, Simon says
Now,
yes,
this
Q&A.
was
All right, well,
the vast
Simon has spoken.
number of immigrants.
And Simon, he's the Blair of this. He's behind it all. And let me know if you want to do a stream yourself, Simon, by the way. Would Nima hate that? Would I get in trouble with the Dark Lord? Let me know.
Who came in under Boris Johnson's premiership,
Yep.
mostly from the third world.
Yep.
And you tweeted fairly recently last
Eddington,
year,
definitely our guy. Check out
someone
my
asked why the
podcast with
Boris
him.
wave happened, and you
He
said
talked about
because
almost
Boris
going to
said,
prison.
change the point system to open the floodgates because I want to make friends with the Financial Times. Literal quote. Can you expand and can you tell us exactly how the Boris wave happened? Was there anyone in the cabinet objecting against this? Was this officials pushing it? Was it Boris himself? Did you push against it? Can you just tell us exactly how this huge policy decision that will have ramifications for the next century happened?
So go back to the 2019 election. The election was being fought out, and
All right, everyone says carry on.
we said to me and a guy called Lee Kane, who's Director of Communications in Number 10, said to Boris, this week, there's the whole subject of immigration is going to be the big story. Obviously, we are going to say that we're pro an Australian point system, and numbers of low-skilled and unskilled need to come down. Oh, I'm not sure about that, he said. And he hummed and hawed and hummed and hawed. Various other people hummed and hawed, hummed and hawed. We got around this problem by a very traditional trick in Westminster. We simply briefed the Telegraph that this was going to be in the Tory party manifesto. The Telegraph splashed on it, and we bounced the Prime Minister and the Cabinet into what we wanted to happen. Could say that that's not really what you should do. Arguably, you'd have a point, but just for context. So it was established in the election that we're going to do the Australian point system, and we are going to cut unskilled immigration, low-skilled immigration. Now, actually, to be fair to Boris, in January, we had the first set of meetings about this, and a whole bunch of officials, and as you'd expect, the CBI, all came screaming into Number 10 saying, well, obviously, you can't actually meet the promises in the election, so you're going to have to rip that up. I said, no, the whole point about us doing this is we are going to change how politics and the government work. We're actually going to do something revolutionary. We're going to do what we said we were going to do in the election. We're not going to make it a lie. And Boris actually agreed. And he said, yep, I agree, we've got to do this. So we agreed in January 2020, Aussie point system, low skilled, unskilled cut. Then, of course, COVID happens. So the whole thing became a moot issue in 2020 because it was literally illegal to move, immigration completely craters everywhere. I then, of course, have a big fallout with Boris in November 2020, with him, his girlfriend, etc., leave. In 2021, Boris then says, he has all these people coming to him saying, the disruption of COVID means we've got to get all these people in. Supply chains problems is global. Da, 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 da. Now, there was some truth in that, obviously, right? Everything had been massively disturbed by COVID. There was an issue from California to Spain. But essentially what they did was they completely opened the floodgates and they started processes like cheating the high-skilled issue. So when we said high-skilled, we meant people with PhDs in astrophysics, people who can actually come and be professor of whatever or be some hotshot doctor in the NHS. What they then did was they redefined high-skilled immigration as low-skilled people to come in and do social care. Because the Treasury said, we need all of these people to come in cheap, and because the Treasury's view of the world is the Ponzi scheme on immigration is central to the Treasury economic model. You bring in a whole load of unskilled people, and then your models say, oh, they'll pay taxes because they're young, blah, 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 blah. And then when they're old, oh, well, then you bring in another wave of people, and the Ponzi scheme keeps going. Inside the Treasury, this is regarded as sensible. Most of the country regards it as completely insane. But that's the basic process that happened. You have the Treasury pushing very hard, and the Treasury is all powerful once the vote leave forces had left. Sunak wanted to do it, but also Boris, once the election was won, wanted to essentially make, as he put it to me in 2020, I want the FT to love me again. I want to make friends with the establishment. Brexit annoyed a lot of people.
Dick.
They all loved me before. I'll make them love me again. So all of these different aspects came together.
How does
So we had some of these
I understand
policies-
Boris wants to be loved by the establishment, but how the heck do you say, oh, we want PhDs in astrophysics? Failing that, let's just get a load of care home workers who hate English people and British people. I mean, how did they reframe that? That's completely mental. He missed the Barnard Castle episode. Yes, not his finest hour. I tend to he wasn't great in the public eye in that way, Cummings, but he's good at this stuff, being behind the scenes and telling MPs they're NPCs.
Come in, which has resulted in the Boris wave. You've mentioned a few: the social care visa, the post-study so-called Deliveroo visa, the expansion of the skilled visa route, which include, for example, chefs can come in. And what happens is you get people cousins of people in Pakistan who come and sort of hire them and work as kebab shop people on a supposedly high-skilled visa. You've got these salary threshold cuts, removing the RLMT. This is for foreign-trained doctors. There's a kind of equivalency, and they introduced the equivalency so foreign-trained doctors can work in the NHS and so on.
Even worse than that, in lots of ways, is the Treasury also actively vandalizes training doctors and nurses, British people becoming doctors and nurses. It consistently keeps cutting the budgets to do that, and it says, oh, just import them all instead. So it's not just the importation, it's also the deliberate choice not to spend money training our own people.
So my question is twofold. One,
Douglas Carswell goes further on that in my interview with him and says, I think I brought it up in the interview, it's in his milestones. He says that there's some cap on us training our own doctors, which goes back to some old rule about not wanting to sort of dilute it and keep it elite and, keep it doctors as a high status profession. And so then we just bring in loads of foreign people. And if you read Alison Pearson in the Telegraph, a lot of these people are just nepotistic Indians who don't actually have better qualifications. So the whole thing is a shit show, as you'd expect.
Who was against this? Who was actively saying this is madness? The voters said, we want less immigration. They've said it for the last 20 years in every single election, including Brexit, and we're going to do the exact opposite. So who was against it? And was this an ideological thing? Was this like Blair saying, or one of the Blair members of the cabinet saying, we're going to rub the right's noses in diversity. This is about, making Britain more diverse. This is a kind of liberal. I mean, Boris has been a liberal in immigration for a long time. So who was against it, and was it ideological?
Obviously, I wasn't there in the meetings in 2021 when this was decided, so I can't say from first-hand. I can say first-hand things that I know from 2020, but not first-hand in 21. As far as I know, really very few people argued against it. And as you could see from the reaction when they did it in 2021, when me and others said, what on earth are you doing? The Tory party almost en masse went along with it, the same as they went along en masse with breaking the guarantee that we would not put up income taxes on normal people. Tory MPs went along with all of that as well. So I think very few people actually pushed back against it. On your second point, I don't think it wasn't organized from Boris, partly because very little is organized from Boris in principle, but it's just not how the whole thing worked. It was a mix of his psychology wanting to be friends with the establishment and powerful bureaucratic forces inside the system. And again, I'll go back to this example of the winter fuel thing, right? Many officials, the top officials based at the Treasury, are cleverer than roughly 100% of the MPs. And they're there for a long time, so they have actual priorities that they care about. If the MPs don't have priorities, therefore, the priorities of the Treasury end up dominating. That's why the mad thing happened on winter fuel payments, which no one can quite understand, including the Labour MPs. Like, well, why are we having to go out and defend this? It's the same thing that happened here. The Treasury has priorities. In the absence of counter-priorities as a political force in number 10 Downing Street, the system just does what Whitehall wants.
So your lecture focused on what should be done. And immigration, I think, is one of the major...
Just quickly, silence is golden. Vit C, Vit D, MSM, and iodine daily. You won't need a doctor unless you break a bone. How will mainstream media help you? Silence is golden. So sorry, I just had to say that. And Haley pointing out a lot of the mistakes in IT come from people the work's been outsourced to, if you know what I mean. Yes, we do.
Crises facing Britain today, particularly when it comes to public trust in politicians and institutions.
Yep.
In America, Donald Trump is enacting his campaign of mass deportations, and if you look at opinion polls, that's a very popular policy that he's doing. In Sweden, they've introduced, or they're going to introduce a new policy next year where they're offering migrants who are low-skilled or unemployed $34,000 to leave Sweden, to encourage them to actually leave.
Yeah.
When it comes to the solution to immigration, do you think that a serious government should look at some of what's happening in Sweden, in the United States, and a kind of adjacent question, why is Nigel Farage mass deportations? When I ask them this question, they always say, no, we don't like mass deportations, despite it being so popular in America.
So I think if you want to restore public trust, then you have to take a serious country has borders. If you don't have borders, you're not a country. And you have to have clear distinctions between lawful and illegal immigration. And if you allow that distinction to be destroyed the way that Whitehall has done, then you have the current shambles. Now, I argued before the Brexit referendum, immigration is now the dominant issue in British politics. If we win the referendum and take back control of immigration policy to here, you will immediately see immigration will drop as an issue in terms of priority, and people's attitudes towards immigrants will improve. The FT, The Economist, all of the usual people laughed at this and said completely mad, but everyone now can look at the data, and it is 100% unarguable that what I said before 2016 was true. Graph goes straight down like that for concern in immigration. Now, fundamental thing that's happened is the combination of the small boats issue has happened, making the whole thing extremely visible, and the use by the courts of the European Convention on Human Rights to make it effectively impossible for the government to stop this problem. I went into this in extreme detail in 2020. I got the Navy, I got Special Forces, I got the lawyers, I got everyone in to number 10 to go through it all, and the answer is extremely simple. Operationally, it's one of the simplest problems facing the country to deal with the boats. You can stop the boats in literally a few days. The entire problem is the legal structure which the MPs have imposed via the Human Rights Act and the way in which judicial review has evolved. The only solution to this is to repeal the Human Rights Act and to change how the judicial review system operates, along with a few other bits of international law. Now, this sounds like everyone, in London, in Westminster, treats this as if it's some crazy thing. All I'm suggesting is we go back to how things used to work before 1997. Right? So it's not some extraordinary revolutionary thing. On the broader question, yes, I think that if you are here unlawfully, you should leave. And I think that until and unless we restore this distinction, immigration will continue to poison politics.
And just very briefly.
Just on that, a couple of things. I just want to pick up this thing about Douglas Carswell. Yeah, check out my interview with him. He is very base these days. Part of it is, though, it's because he's in the US. So one, he's got the First Amendment. Starmer can't lock him up, right? And two, he's sort of done his UK career in politics. Maybe he'll come back, but it gives you that freedom. And it's a bit like Cummings here, isn't it? The sort of tragedy is that people can never do this stuff while they're in the system. And if you do, you'll be punished for it. If you do read about Enoch Powell, he is punished for rebelling quite early against certain bills and things like that. Never really recovers his career. And other things happen, like Ian McLeod, or have you say his name, does a speech that Churchill sees, and just by chance the order is swapped, so he goes ahead of Powell. Churchill sees the other guy and goes, oh, he's good. Kind of like when you're a stand-up comedian or something, or that in Backbeat, the Beatles movie, where you're just like, oh, you see someone, right, and they missed. Churchill saw Ian McLeod and didn't see Powell, and that was a big thing. Anyway, if you rebel in your career, you will be punished like Powell and like the late Norman Tebbit, rest in peace. But if you say it after, that's different, isn't it? And Carswell and Cummings, you could critique them and say they're saying it after, but at least they're saying it. And some of Carswell's tweets now, you're like, is that Steve Law's sock puppet account? Anyway, and on the boats, just before I go back in, Cummings has always said the boats can be dealt with very, very easily. It's purely a legal thing. the logistics are so easy. Some people say it's not, and the military, the Navy won't do it, but he's always said that they will. And I always think it's really embarrassing for the establishment that someone like Cummings, very smart, has been in the establishment, is saying how easy it would be to stop the boats. It's not. He's not some crazy outsider saying it. He might be crazy, but he's a serious figure. Anyway,
the reform point. Would you recommend to them, look, supporting mass deportations publicly, would that be a popular thing to the public? Yes or no?
I think it would be popular for the relevant sections of the electorate. There's obviously going to be a set of people, so there's roughly 20% of the people who say, join the euro, let the UN control the British army, give everything control to some international body, and rejoin the EU immediately, right? That's 20% of the population. They are obviously not going to support this. But in terms of the relevant elements of the population, yes. But I think a problem that Farage has in general is a problem you can see across the West at the moment as the old system fails. A lot of people like Farage is, in a sense, the same as a lot of the other parties, right? They formed their views in the 90s and 2000s. And it's very hard for them to adjust to a world where the truths and conventional ideas of that time are broken down. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see reform now getting caught in lots of these things, because it's hard for them to adapt. Because it's hard for all of these old things to adapt.
And it looks like Trump is ahead of the game on that. He's kind of more contemporary. He's not stuck in the past on the issue of immigration, at least. Slightly flippant question, but I asked Liz Truss who her favourite Tory PM was other than Churchill and Thatcher. She said Javier Milei. I wanted to ask...
That's unfair.
I know you're interested in history. You're obsessed with Bismarck in a good way. How does the intelligence of contemporary politicians, people like Liz Truss, people like Boris, people in the cabinet, compare with our historical prime ministers or leaders of the past?
Poor old Liz Truss.
This is a theme.
She is smart. I know this is not a popular thing. She's smart, but she's mathematical. And if you believe Ed Dutton, she's autistic. But she is smart. People think she's just not smart. I think that's really unfair. Whatever you think to her, I think she is smart, and she grills interviewees on maths and things like that. And you could say Boris is smart when it comes to the classics and so on. It's more about, with Boris, it's more a failing in character. And with Truss, it was a failure to understand people and the system she was dealing with. But none of these things were actually intelligence. Not that I'm saying they're as smart as Powell and that era. No one's as smart as Powell, but also the Anthony Benn era. Yes, of course, there's been a decline in education, decline in standards. But I just think it's a little harsh to say that, even though I love Steve, it's a little harsh to say that those two are dumb. Why even let Boris off by saying he's dumb? He's a weak character is the problem. Anyway, sorry.
That I've harped on about for over 10, 15 years, right? Like a fundamental aspect of what's happened, and I think something which business people have greatly underrated until recently is this big historic shift in talent. In the past, for obvious reasons, a lot of elite talent went into public service of some kind, government, armies, intelligence services. The reason is if you don't have elite talent in those things, you very quickly get your arms hacked off. So there were huge incentives for that to happen. Aristocratic societies did it naturally. But what's happened in the last 50 years is more and more elite talent has gone into some combination of maths, money, and computing. And that's fundamentally changed the caliber of the people, not just in the political parties, but also in the upper echelons of the civil service. If you go back and read the kind of documents that were written even 40 years ago, never mind 140 years ago, the caliber of the writing and the thought was extraordinarily different than the caliber of what is written and said now by the permanent secretary of whatever. Look at the cabinet secretary himself. Look at Wormold and go back and compare him with Bridges, with Maurice Hankey. Look at the caliber of a lot of the senior generals and go back and compare with Alan Brooke, Churchill's main general in World War II. So this is a general and fundamental issue across the Western world that partly because of this mix of nuclear weapons bringing long-term peace and the fall of the Soviet Union, society has evolved in a way where elite talent has moved off to these other things. And unless that changes, then we're going to stay in this dysfunctional situation.
Coming back to Farage, the
Yeah,
people that he
that's key.
surrounded himself.
Just quickly before Farage. Yes, elite talent coming back into areas like military and into government and into civil service. That is absolutely key. And that's what Dominic Cummings' big theme. Truss is a Cameroon, you should remember. She was a former Lib Dem and came in under Cameron's change, the Tory party, hugger hoodie stuff. Yeah, that's true. That she was part of that and the A-list and all that, I suppose, or that kind of era. But she changed later on, didn't she? Now she's always on about the deep state and hanging out with Steve Bannon. So she's definitely changed a bit.
With Zia Youssef, Richard Tice, the new chairman, Dr. David Ball. Are you impressed with the decisions that he's made in terms of the human capital around him within reform? You know, David Ball, who today was saying that he believes in ghosts, and yesterday was saying immigration was the lifeblood of our country.
I'm afraid I don't really know very much about any of the characters you mentioned, but obviously, this is not to insult them, but it is obvious that the reform has not embarked on the kind of major outreach of talent which I think is needed. What's actually needed in this country is a political project that very aggressively and openly says, we are replacing the elites. There are thousands of people in Whitehall who currently have jobs that shouldn't exist. The jobs are going to cease to exist. The people are going to be removed. We're going to change how the institutions work, and we are going to recruit much higher caliber elites. And that has to be at the heart of a serious political project. It's crazy to think that you can change the institutions if you have the same caliber of people and the same kind of HR system that rewards everyone for delaying everything, rewards everyone for not taking personal responsibility, that rewards all the most pathological and dysfunctional ways of operating. And you see it very, very clearly, right, in the civil service now, this nightmare thing where there's still a lot of incredibly able people join in their early 20s. But by the time they're 40, you have an inverse talent ratchet. The great people have almost all gone because they look at their boss and they say, I don't want to become like them. My God, it's a nightmare. And able people have choices, so able people go off and do other things. And then the absolute worst people loved by the HR system are the people who then get promoted to be perm sec. So all of these things are connected. You can't change the system unless you change the people, and you can't get in great people unless you have a political project that says we actually must revive healthy, functioning institutions.
So let's say that your government gets in, or a government.
Yeah, that's key, isn't it? All about bringing in the talent. And Cummings has said that Farage hasn't done this. He's talked about the need for it, but he's noticed that it hasn't been done. You got people like David Bull, as Steve there says, talking about ghosts. It's ludicrous. Does Farage grasp this? Simon says, this is the problem. The online right is surfeiting with natural elite talent, and the insurgent Farage locked them out over what he thinks are safety optics instead of acknowledging their concerns. I think that is key. And I just want to say quickly, someone says, Carl says, I hope Cummings joins Ben Habib's college. Do you think I should join it, Carl? Let me know, because that's something I was wondering about. Probably shouldn't say it, but hey, it's just us here.
That you think is taking matters seriously. What should they try and declassify? Now, you've talked about the government or sort of internal deep state. I'm going to use that crude phrase. They're over-classifying documents to do with paying off terrorists who are hiding in caves and so on. And in the United States, Trump is declassifying all sorts of documents. Yeah. Well, he said that he would around the JFK files, the Epstein files, but not just that, about basically what the DOJ and other organizations within the US government had been doing under Biden and other people. So you're advising the new government. Where should we look at declassifying information? Is too much information classified?
Yeah, you have a system where too much is classified and then they can't actually keep a lot of secrets that they should keep secret. So as often you have the worst of both worlds. So one big set of things is, as I alluded to, the whole issue about the ECHR and the Human Rights Act. So I'll give you a concrete example that became news last year. Generic raised the question, but then the whole thing went completely doolally in the media about the issue of special forces and whacking people abroad. Now, I've sat in these meetings, now I'll tell you what actually happens. What actually happens is that terrorist X is identified in somewhere like Syria. The obvious thing to do from an intelligence perspective is for special forces to grab terrorist X, grab their phone interrogate them, and then build a network out, right? This is just classic counterinsurgency and how you deal with terrorism. What happened is that Cabinet Office officials said that arresting them and incarcerating them in the way that was proposed is unlawful under the Human Rights Act. However, they said, if a minister is prepared to sign the following document about the threat that they pose, it is lawful to whack them with a drone from above. So repeatedly over the last few years, you have this completely insane system driven by human rights law, whereby, now this all went crazy, right, with the media, because the media claimed that, oh, Jenrick is saying that the SAS and whatnot are assassinating people unlawfully. It was the opposite of what the media said was the opposite of the truth. The whole point is not that these people are being whacked unlawfully. The whole point is the system is saying it's lawful to whack them, but not lawful to arrest them. Now, there are many, many, many things like this that happen all through the system, particularly around ECHR and the Human Rights Act, that are completely bonkers. I mentioned to you cases that I'd seen with guys literally being hunted from cave to cave, calling up satellite phones, talking to their lawyers at the bar, trying to shake down the taxpayer for millions of quid and getting it. So there's cases like that all around. That's a whole category of things. And I suggested this to Sunak. When I met with Sunak just after he became PM, I said to him, just declassify hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these cases in the documents, shove it all out into the public domain, and then just say the country has to look at these things and make a decision. If at the end of this, the majority of people say, actually, we still want to be part of the ECHR, fine, okay. But do it knowing how the system truly works, not because the truth of it is hidden from the voters.
I'm going to quote from your recent blog post. They've started propaganda operations with the old media to spread the meme that our real danger is the far right, code for white people. Now, one of the most insane stories I read, I think this week or last week, was that Prevent now classifies what's called cultural nationalism as a terrorist ideology. I'll define what cultural nationalism is to Prevent. Western culture is under threat from mass migration and a lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups. Now, one suspects that many people in this room are all terrorists. How seriously should we be taking this stuff, or does this lead to the arrest of Lucy Connolly and others?
I think it's obviously crazy, right? I mean, you can agree with that statement that you've read out, or you can disagree. But the idea that it ought to be illegal to say that or argue for it, the idea that it's somehow like a precursor to being a terrorist, is obviously stupid. But the fact that such ideas are percolating in Whitehall shows what a crisis Whitehall is in. And the reason is because they are terrified of violence popping out. They thought and said last year.
Yes, Chris, it is live. I know I'm not talking much anymore.
Far from being outside of our control. I've watched meetings with the police in Downing Street where they said to the Prime Minister, we can't go and do blah, we can't go and arrest blah because there'll be a riot and we can't actually do it. So the police are increasingly of the feeling that they can't take what most people regard as sensible action because they're fearful of what it will provoke. And that, I think, is just a disastrous slippery slope that they've got themselves onto. And you can see that slippery slope in operation, right? With the case a week or so ago, whenever it was, when the Turkish guy is done for blasphemy. Now, you can say that you're pro. Again, my point is not whether you should be for burning the Quran. You can say you're pro or anti blasphemy laws. That's something that should be debated in Parliament by the people that we elect, and then they decide and they vote on it, and that's that. What shouldn't happen is that elements of the system say, we're that far away from riots, so we've got to start using the courts to send signals that people can't do certain things because of fear of offending certain religions. Whatever religion, it doesn't matter if it's the Quran or anything. It's the principle at stake, which is just, it seems to me, is obviously disastrous and obviously very corrosive. And obviously you need a regime that says all of this sort of stuff is getting binned straight away. If you look at how bad it is, right? Look around Parliament now. The marchers have got closer and closer. The marchers calling for a second Holocaust have got closer and closer and closer to Parliament. They are actively intimidating the MPs. And I talk to MPs. MPs are fearful. And you also have such a pathologically dysfunctional regime that it can't actually provide security for MPs that speak out and won't provide security for MPs that speak out. Now, again, there are endless laws on the statute books that could be used to actually solve these problems sensibly, but the pathological system will not use them, and therefore they pile tinder higher and higher and higher, waiting for a spark.
That's so insane. You know, one thing I've found really insane, sorry to stop it, is why am I sorry to stop it? That's how it works. One thing I found completely insane is many people will say things like, oh, the elites are okay, you know, it's just we're not and we're unsafe and the elites are fine. And of course, there's some truth in that in our weird Hunger Games dystopia, but they're actually not safe themselves either. When you saw the intimidation of politicians, and obviously we've had the deaths of Sir David Ames and others, and you go, hang on, they're not safe either. And recently we found that the speaker was completely rattled and he changed things around, didn't he, based on the intimidation from these so-called, well, from the sort of Palestine crew. And you go, they can't even keep themselves safe. That's the absolutely insane thing now. But they're just completely inept to even protect themselves. Anyway, just a thought.
I know you're interested in the security services, and I think that's an area which is under scrutinized in the British media and beyond. But what we can see from the outside is I look on the head of MI6's Twitter account, and he has his pronouns in his bio, and he's obsessed with LGBTQ issues, tweeting about it and so on. I mean, what do you make of that? Do you think that he is a serious person? Why is he doing this?
I mean, most people are intensely mimetic, right? And most people copy what's around them because they're fearful about social approval. And what happened with the LGBTQ thing, plus Hamas thing, is that it became intensely mimetic, and therefore everyone started copying it. And no set of people are more susceptible to mimesis like that than graduates, intelligent graduates, who are the easiest to fool and the easiest to whip up into emotional frenzies. That madness spread all the way through Whitehall. In 2020, I said to Boris, we should just knock all this on the head. We should send people around and we should just tear the entire infrastructure out of the Cabinet Office and out of Whitehall. Fire all of the people. Stonewall should be banned, kicked out. All of this bullshit should end immediately.
This is the head of MI6.
Yes.
This isn't graduates.
Yes. Correct.
What do we do with him?
I was just said, all of it needs rooting out. All the madness needs rooting out. If people want to have those views, fine. But you're not having those views and staying in the intelligence services. Leave.
He said that before, hasn't he, somewhere? That's so funny when Cummings is like, they've all got to go, even the MI6. But it's a great point. He says, you can have those views, just not in MI5, MI6, not in the intelligence services. And we saw the head of, I always forget which MI we're on now, but we saw the head, even though he just said it, we saw the head with his pronouns in his bio on Twitter. I almost replied to him, something about him, are you going on the cover as a moron or something like that? I had some sort of quip, I can't remember it now. But I thought, can I write this to MI6 or whatever they're called? Because, like, will they get me? And in this current thing, I was like, sometimes I think that, like, do I want to piss off these people? But yeah, you can't have pronouns in your bio if you're in the intelligence services. Completely deranged, completely crackers, completely bonkers.
You can't have...
Oh, it's a clap even. Now he's cooking.
You can't have these deranged things spreading. I mean, Greta, right, is a perfect symbol for it, bringing together the kind of like anti-capitalist green cult with the pro-Hamas cult and the LGBTQ plus Hamas cult, all unified, wearing the Hamas outfit draped in the pride flag. It's the kind of perfect symbol for the madness which has infiltrated universities and infiltrated Whitehall, and it all needs rooting out.
Okay, 2 more questions and we're done. You said in your speech that you witnessed cover-ups of the rape gangs. Now, I thought that was fascinating. Can you talk about what you saw? What happened? Did you report these people? Should they, be prosecuted for covering up these terrible crimes? Can you expand on what you said?
So obviously all over Whitehall, there was mass cover-ups of the whole thing for the same reason that we've already alluded to, fear. Fear of the political consequences of facing reality. What I saw in 2011, I mean, there are lots of different things. Normally in Whitehall, the cliche that it's a cock-up, not a conspiracy, is generally true. The one big exception, I would say, is regarding child abuse, where there are actually multiple conspiracies constantly and largely successful. I watched these happening repeatedly in the Department of Education because the issue was parked there by Gordon Brown and Ed Balls, so I had to deal with it when I was there. I would watch the redacted documents and the actual unredacted documents about lots of these cases, and you could see that the redacted documents are redacted entirely to hide the incompetence of the system. Now, what happened on the gangs is that when Andrew Norfolk at the time started to try to report the issue, the council went to officials inside the Department of Education and said, we want to bring a judicial review to have the courts suppress the Times' reporting and not allow it to happen. Some of the officials inside the DfE who routinely organized cover-ups on such issues were, of course, very in favor of it. But there were another set of officials inside DfE who agreed with me that this was absolutely appalling, and in fact, we should do the opposite. So what we ended up doing was saying to Michael Gove, you should write to the council and say that if you bring this judicial review, we will actually appear in court on behalf of the Times, not on behalf of you. That obviously blew up the judicial review attempt by the council to keep it secret, and then Norfolk could publish his piece in the Times. Unfortunately, I think Norfolk died recently without even knowing that this ever even happened. But that's just one small example of something which happened many, many times on this subject over a few decades in Whitehall, which is, of course, why the system is absolutely desperate not to have an inquiry. A system which has inquiries at the drop of a hat about all kinds of, like, one person dies, public inquiry, spend 80 million quid on lawyers, take 5 years. This case involving thousands and thousands and thousands of children, no.
It just, to me, it seems bizarre there's no accountability to the people that you're talking about. I mean,
it's only bizarre if you believe the old ideas about how the system works. It's not bizarre once you realize that the people there are not operating on the incentives or with the values that you think they are. It's actually completely standard and completely normal and completely unsurprising.
Okay, I'm going to quote from your latest blog, and you quoted Nietzsche. The democratization of Europe is at the same time an involuntary arrangement for the breeding of tyrants. 1 in 5 Generation Z and millennial Britons prefer strong leaders without elections to democracy, a recent poll revealed. Do you agree that democracy is overrated?
Classic Steve.
That's a very difficult question to answer.
Please be honest.
I would say no, it's not overrated, but I would say that if you go back and read the ancient analyses of democracy in Plato and in Thucydides in particular, particularly in Thucydides' book 3, where he talks about civil conflict and civil war, you see that the ancients assumed that, the ancients thought that you had to have the most educated people in charge of government. And therefore, kind of by definition, democracy was not the best system, which is why in the ancient world, most people thought that the best political regime was some kind of mixed system where, yes, the people have a vote on things, but it's not a pure democratic system like Athens. That, I think, of course, it's a crude generalization, but I think it's a reasonable way to summarize the kind of average educated perspective in ancient Athens or ancient Rome. So the issues that you can read about there are very live issues for us now. How does democracy obviously is in crisis, democratic regimes are in crisis. Personally, though, I hope that we find a way of reviving the regime rather than it be replaced by some new oligarchy. And I would also say that if you look around Britain now, the real problems that we've got politically are not problems with normal voters. Normal voters are generally good people with good instincts and are much more sensible. people often ask, or overcomplicate why we won the 2016, 2019 elections. Fundamental reason from my own perspective was that I like normal voters, and I respect their views, and I take them seriously. That is not the common view in Westminster. In Westminster, normal voters are basically held in contempt. And unsurprisingly, therefore, the contempt is now reflected back at Westminster. It's very confusing for the MPs who run around all day saying, why does everyone hate us? And I say, well, not that surprising, because they know that you hate them. So why are you surprised by this turn of events? It's not very hard to figure out. So I would say our real problem is educated elites in certain institutions in the country that need purging. The problem is not with the normal voters.
So it's replace the elites, not the voters, basically.
Correct.
All right, Dominic Cummings, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Whee! It's inappropriate cheering at the end. Awesome. All right, that's it. Do you know what? One comment at the end, apart from Curtis Yarvin has entered the chat, is was something I was going to say. Would have been funny about 2 minutes ago. Is that Cummings says democracy is not the problem, but you could argue that the problem is that having democracy forces the media to shove constant propaganda down our throats because we're all political actors and agents. And Oren McIntyre is very good on this in The Total State. I've talked about that book a lot, but how, of course, with social media, everyone is a political actor at all times on social media, and thus the need to constantly propagandize us and censor us. And so the problem with democracy is not the voting and the voters, it's that it incentivizes media. So, incentivizes perverse things like mainstream media. But hey, I'm out of my pay grade here, really. But interesting answer from Cummings. And thank you so much, everyone. I mean, Steve P and Cave, thank you so much for saying this was a great stream. Max Friend, thank you on Twitter. He says it was a mixture of Mark Goldbridge is a guy that does Man United content, which I know because I'm a Man United fan, and he's kind of hilarious and Partridge-esque and kind of buffoonish. So not sure how to take that, but he says I should insult the chat more. So look forward to that in future. And Simon Roberts, Elite Circulation, please. Neil says, well done. Thank you, Neil. Enjoy this, Nick. Thank you. Love sexy. Someone says, I need a beer. 22 hours to go. Not sure what that means. I actually need not a beer, but I need to chill because I just went to the gym today, back at the gym for the first time in ages after holiday illness. And then I went back in 30-degree heat, came straight back here and did this because I slightly overestimated how quickly I could get back from the gym and do this. Didn't eat anything and just now I'm just crashing out. But to quote the kids. But thank you all so much. And I just want to wrap up and say, Simon says, thanks for doing a live analysis, Nick. More. Thank you, Simon. Stephen, 1984. Stephen C. Great stream, Nick. Didn't Boomer the tech too? Yeah, I mean, yes, thank you. I did prepare a little bit. Cheers, Nick. Says AR, the minority needs to organize. They sure do. And so many comments. Yes, thank you very much, Nick, says Christina. Thank you. I mean, it's probably self-indulgent me just reading all the thank yous, but much appreciated. Someone asked if it would be on Substack. Yeah, I could put it on Substack, I suppose. Why not? And this is always a problem between, Steve P said that. It's always a problem between building your Substack and then your YouTube. And it's I was all in on Substack, but then it's like, is that going to be enough? Do I have to do YouTube? How do I survive in this harsh media landscape? I was speaking to someone from a company that does shorts, not the clothing item that's popular in summer, but these short videos on YouTube. And they're like an American company, and they're like, people spend thousands a month just on shorts, and each short has a director, an editor, and has 6 consultants on it. And I've realized now, at the stage of the game we're in now, we're not in the game. Someone like Carl was an OG. We're not in that game anymore. We're in the game where I'm up against a team of people in a room wargaming a single Tucker Carlson short of 59 seconds, and I've got to somehow compete with those people just with my creativity and natural genius. So it's a David versus Goliath challenge. Luckily I'm up for it because I'm completely insane. But Martin says, thanks, Nick. Thank you. Colin, make it a regular Wednesday night. Nothing going on Wednesday night. Interesting. Wednesday night, the only thing about that is I do the Dixon Cox topical podcast on Wednesday, so it will already be a lot of podcasting. We sometimes do 2 hours. and then you'll already have that. So maybe Friday would be better because I've got no life, but I'll consider it. Maybe Thursday. This really was awesome. Thank you, Steve P. Simon Roberts, you need to chat to AA about algo maxing. Oh, yeah, does he think he's cracked the algo? I'm sure he has. He's very smart. He doesn't bother with like high-level thumbnails, does he? But I did the one well, don't insult in case you do the thumbnails or something, Simon, but I know he was like anti-thumbnail for a long time. That's what I mean. Rory does mine. He's very good, but I did my one today on my own, all on my own, because I suddenly came up with this idea this afternoon. So I was really impressed with the picture. You are one of the heroes, Nick. Oh, thank you, Colin. Incredible. God grants you the tools and opportunity, mate. You're doing grand so far, says Steve P. Yes, thank you. And I do need all this encouragement. So that's quite correct. Crowdsource your audience for expertise, says Cave Webster. Yes, good point. Friday better, also no life, Stephen C. Yeah, I'm with you there, Stephen. Well, let's see. Lots of people have gone now because they're like the people leaving the football match to beat the traffic. But thank you very much. Big, beautiful thumbnail. Big, beautiful thumbnail. So many pictures you wouldn't believe. You wouldn't believe the algorithms. We cracked the algorithm, folks. They said they couldn't crack it, but we cracked it. The algorithm. I should have done more impressions. Well, depends what you mean by impressions. I mean, an impression also means to impose something upon something and create an indent of some sort. But perhaps you mean an impersonation. Sorry, I haven't done Peterson for a while. Well, depends what you mean by Peterson. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, OS Wolf. Bye-bye. Go and clean the lodge, whatever that means, before the boss comes back from Halls. Calls to action. Yes, you're right, Colin. Like and subscribe. Yeah, like and subscribe, everyone. Thank you very much, even though some people have gone. Good content beats good thumbnails. True. That was great. Thanks, says Robert. Thank you so much. Should do more lives. Cat Shin. Maybe I will, Cat. Maybe I will. Good Kermit, says Colin. How dare you? Well, it depends what you mean by Kermit. See, that time was better. I got the graveliness as well. I was always last to leave the party, says Christina. Yeah, I'm sticking around. We've done over 2 hours. Pretty sweet. I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to do about 6 hours a day. I'm just going to live stream my whole life. Hope that was interesting. Cummings is always interesting, even if I'm not. Michael McDonald is your best. He came from somewhere back in her long ago. Sentimental fool. Don't see. I actually look like him now as well. Trying hard to recreate what had. This is niche content now, isn't it? Will sing for super chats. Although I didn't even get a super chat for that. How do you get more super chats? Do you have to sort of play mind games and like psychologize? Hoping to see Marvel style end credit scenes. Little outtakes. The whole thing's an outtake with me, isn't it? But you got the Michael McDonald impression. Who else can I do? I do Trump. Okay, I do Peterson pretty well when I nail it. I do Michael McDonald as of like the other day, and I can do Werner Herzog. I haven't done that for years. Nature is cruel. Some people think nature is romantic. I can't do it. It's been too many years. Schaefer is doing 4-hour podcast. You need to up your game. Crikey, imagine 4 hours of Lewis Schaefer. Oh, my, that's painful. I shouldn't say it. Well, I could say that. I haven't said it. I will say, fine, I will say it. They should all be killed. 4 hours of Lewis Schaefer. Wow. How many subscribers has he got? Hoping it's not many. Oh, that'll piss me off. I've noticed I'm doing all right. I should have maybe not done it all on my old channel because this channel was going so long. Maybe that's bad for the old algo. 892 subscribers. Okay. I can live with that. I think I've got more than Francis Foster. Shout out Francis. He wants me to do a show soon. I'm mates with Francis, but he'll probably overtake me soon. But it's not a competition, guys. Lewis has had a show on Resonance FM, left the art station. He has indeed a very slick show. So yeah, all right. The Lewis chat is coming in. I guess we don't want to milk it too much. Let me know any ideas in future. Thank you very much, everyone. What other things? I always wanted to react to Dominic Cummings things. I find him so interesting. I'll do my Enoch Powell video you've asked for. It might take ages, though, because I'll try and do it to some impossible, perfect level like I do. And Simon says, leave him wanting more. That's a good way of saying leave. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you again on one of these soon, maybe. We'll try one again next Friday or something. I've got coming up Laurie Whitwell. Whitwell? That's a Man United football commentator. Laurie Wastel on demographics is our next podcast. Very interesting podcast. He wrote a very interesting piece on demographics. And that's coming out on Monday. And please like and subscribe on the YouTube. Go to nickdixon.net for all my extra content, and there's loads of stuff on there. And we thank you all very much. And I'm tempted to say goodbye, which would be very done. That's my other impression. Thank you. Goodbye. Bye, everyone. End. Can't actually end it. God bless, Colin. And now I'll try to actually end it.